we're gonna, Rich is gonna be here any second, so we're gonna go ahead and do roll call. We're gonna go ahead and do roll call because Rich will be here shortly.
Okay, Chair, I'll proceed through the names.
Thank you.
Chris Mayton.
Present.
Lori Smallwood.
Here.
Rich Sheldon. His chair indicated is
He will be coming.
gonna be late, okay.
Everybody else here.
Christina Ramsayer,
Here.
Lindy Hanley,
Here.
Don Hokinson.
Here.
Kathleen Walker,
Here.
Jan Lee,
Here.
Amelia Page,
Here.
Jeremy Peetzel,
Here.
Carl Exner,
Here.
Darren Wegner,
Here.
Art O'Leary,
Present.
Linda Malone.
Here. Okay, with that done, let's go on to approval of the minutes from the May 5th meeting. We move to approval of the minutes of May 5th. Been moved by Jan Lee and seconded by
second that.
Lindy Hanley, that we approve the minutes from May 5th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. And now I'm gonna call for any public comment. I don't see the public comment that we had last time, so is there anything online?
There's no one online, Chair.
Okay, and no blue cards, so we will go on to budget review and turn it over to Tyler one.
Thank
Thing
you,
one
Chair.
and thing two.
Got me off guard for a second. Well, first and foremost, thank you again for being in attendance this evening. It's been a long process so far, and I appreciate all of your involvement. To date, we've made it through all of the City of Sandy funds, including general fund, utility funds, special revenue funds, and the only remaining fund that we have to discuss later this evening is the Urban Renewal Agency Fund. My proposal to the chair was to dive into the discussion around the city first and try to get that knocked out before we moved on to urban renewal. Technically, we should be sort of calling to order an urban renewal budget committee meeting when we get to that point. So rounding out the city's discussion would be, I think, the better approach.
Clean, I like it.
Clean, yes. You've already approved the minutes from the last meeting. I would just point you to page 8 in the agenda packet. This is a summary of the suggestions from the budget committee that we had at the time of publication Thursday afternoon.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Can't attest to what
Okay,
time.
Can't attest to what time it was. I believe there is one other item that a budget committee member wanted to propose that was not included in this. I can either, Amelia, if you want to share what that is, or I can share what you had sent me. If you're not already back, I don't want to put you on the spot. I
No.
kind of just did. I apologize.
It's okay. I was hoping to suggest that we use $46,000 of the $467,000 to meet the gap needed for the library, for the mobile library. Because we had a lot of comments and I want to make sure that the public sees that we care about the library, because it would free up, then it would free up the district revenue as well.
Thank you. Well,
Are we commenting on that?
no, I wanted just to get that
That's just in there.
included so that
Got it.
everone
Yes.
kind of knew of that additional talking point, since it wasn't on the document in front of you. So we've done this a couple different ways in the past, in other budget committee meetings. There's been times where we've just sort of had motions and jumped right into conversation around whether there was support or a lack of support for any of those motions. We could take this bullet by bullet, and these suggestions for the budget committee. Chair, I'll leave that up to you to sort of lead that discussion and how you would like to approach that. But from staff's perspective, we're ready to jump into any of the suggestions that were provided, answer any additional questions, shed any additional light on, anything that you need some additional information on. Got department heads here to assist if there's anything that the three of us right here can't answer. So Chair Malone, happy to move forward as you would see fit.
I just have a question. On the bullets at the bottom where it says upgrade to council chambers, does that include the sound system?
That was, yeah, the upgrades to council chambers, I think, was a general statement that would include the audio visual improvements as well as probably some ADA improvements that ultimately need to happen in this building.
Can you clarify what page we're referring to?
Yeah,
It's not numbered.
it's not numbered in your paper document, but it
I didn't
is.
hear.
It's the last page of the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the suggestion is?
So.
Don.
Sure. Can we get a summary of, now that we've gone through everything, of where we are with the proposed budget from staff in terms of how much money we're talking about and what funds we're directing? What funds are under discussion for tonight, and which ones
Sure.
are not?
So from staff's perspective, I think I'll capture all this, but if someone feels differently, please feel free to jump in. I think the majority of the discussions exist within the general fund. There was a proposal to allocate additional funding in the street fund for some of the pavement management work. That's a very simple adjustment, pulling some money out of contingency and allocating to the street maintenance or the pavement management. Goodness gracious. So that's probably a fairly easy topic to knock out. I don't recall there being any open points of discussion around transit. Water, wastewater, stormwater were all, there was discussion around items in those funds, but I don't recall anything specific as far as proposed changes to those. I think they were more just questions around implementing, rate increases and what the capital projects look like over the next 2 years. Certainly the debt service fund doesn't require much discussion unless we're discussing.
I guess what I'm looking for is at some point, we're gonna make a motion, we're going to approve a budget. Kind of looking for the tangible thing that we're all saying yes to.
467,000.
Yeah, so the chair's point, there's $467,000 that's sort of in play that could either remain in contingency or be allocated to various programs or initiatives that the budget committee feels are important that aren't captured in the proposed budget. And then, any other tweaks or suggestions that the budget committee would like to propose, we can dive right into those. But I think the vast majority of the discussion will likely be within the general fund, given that that's where the $467,000 is.
So when we
Is
opposed, I'm just trying to get clear on what we as body are approving. We're not approving this the way it first came out because it's been updated. There's at least one page that's been updated or inserted, right?
That was just a presentation. It was adding the column,
There's a missing column.
which doesn't have any material effect on the actual.
Okay, so.
Budget.
So to clarify, then what are we approving?
You would be, if the budget committee were to approve this document as it stands right now, you'd be approving the essentially the total appropriations of the fund. So we don't approve by line item, we approve by. It's kind of getting, you would be approving the, the council ultimately, let me back up, I apologize. The council will ultimately approve appropriations for each fund. The budget committee's role is to approve a budget that reflects council goals and initiatives, and sets the tax rate. So we would be looking for, I move to approve the budget as is or as amended with whatever tweaks we want to talk about. And then ultimately, how do we phrase this? I move to approve the city of Sandy's property tax rate of $4.11.52. So, yeah, as changes sort of roll in or proposals roll in, we'll keep track of what those motions are. Ultimately, I suspect that the motion language would be something to the effect of, I move to approve the 25-27 city of Sandy budget as amended. We would then have a list of what those amendments are.
And so those amendments, just to clarify for everybody, and I apologize, just because I forget things from time to time. And I forgot that, clearly. So when we're doing line item, so the level of detail that we're making adjustments to is that fund budget number.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if the library thing, it's to the budget that we're making an addition, not to, for a specific purpose. I mean, the rationale is for a purpose, but it's
Yeah, I mean, from
ultimately
a-
just a dollar amount to the line.
From a technical standpoint, I think the conversations are gonna be around probably specific line
Yep.
item things, because that's what we have an interest in, right? Street.
But it's gonna roll up
pavement,
to the
But
library.
it's gonna roll up to the library fund, yeah,
Thanks.
or library department, yeah.
I have one other clarification. The people that are on this budget committee that aren't on the city council, this is their last chance to
Mhm.
make suggestions. If you're on the city council and all that $467,000 stays in contingency for things like the library or whatever, just like with the pavement management plan, we can do nothing with that tonight, and the council later on could say, okay, in June or July, he's got a plan for it, we need to take that money, and they can decide to take it out of the street funds contingency and do that pavement management plan. They can do that unilaterally as a council with a vote, correct?
Correct. So once this budget
We adopt a
is
budget, it
approved
has a
this
certain
evening,
amount in the contingency for the street. They can disperse that.
so that change could be made as a budget committee recommendation. That change could be made on June 2nd when we bring it back to the council for adoption, or that change could be made 6 months from now because we decide that we want to prioritize another project and we have funding in the budget. It's just a simple budget adjustment that needs to take place to allocate funding. for a
Carl
specific
went up
project.
first, so Carl,
A long time ago, I was understanding that if the council decided to make a more than substantial, more than insignificant change to the budget, that you would have to reconvene committee, I remember. And I heard that we have never done that before. because Council likes to keep the control of it, and maybe I'll state it that way. Is that correct? So there still is a significant change that would have to reinvent this committee.
If the council were to make a significant change, and I'll double check this, I believe it's 10% of what's presented before you this evening. The council were to make a change in excess of 10%. Before they adopt it, we'd have to reconvene the budget committee. Once the council adopts the budget on June 2nd. There's no reconvening of the budget committee. There may or may not be public hearing requirements that we need to comply with depending on the amount of the change in the future, but it's not a reconvening of the budget committee. It is a council decision with a public hearing for those proposed changes.
Okay, so that in mind, set that aside. The numbers that are in front of us for the 467,000, we're not gonna talk about the specific line item numbers that might be, is that correct? So they're just the concepts that the council gonna get, so, is that right?
So let's use, I'm gonna
Yes,
use your
Yeah,
example.
that's what, I was gonna go that way anyway.
Let's assume that the budget committee has interest in allocating another $46,000 because that's the difference between grant funding and the acquisition costs in the Sandy Library. The discussion point is very specific to a line item, right? You're acquiring a vehicle and this is specific to that funding gap. The motion, and what we will actually do is just increase the library general revenue allocation by $46,000. We would rebalance that department in this example. So your talking points are certainly going to be specific to an item. I don't think anyone's going to say, let's allocate $50,000 without saying why they're allocating, $50,000. But the actual administrative role of what we do with that is going to be noted in the budget. When we bring it back to council, it will be reflected in the appropriate line item and appropriate department.
Okay. So the item is not 46 or whatever $1,000, it's making up the difference is what it really is. That we
Well,
have here.
That was,
that's the amount.
I believe that's
I get
the
that part, but that's,
specific proposal in that example, yeah.
there's no other numbers in any of the other items. So we generally know very little about the item, other than the fact that you and the council will have to figure the balance.
So there were no dollar amounts specifically discussed when these items were noted over the last 2 weeks. So if we jump into allocate additional funds for cybersecurity, for example. Greg, who's responsible for our IT department, provided a memo the last meeting. And, ultimately that memo suggested that we need more time to get solid quotes before we allocate funding. So if there's an interest in ensuring that there's funding available for cybersecurity, the council, the budget committee could just keep an amount in contingency with the expectation that staff is bringing back a proposal at a later date, and the council would then fund it. Or the budget committee could say, you know, we think that $50,000 is a good number. Let's allocate $50,000 to that IT set aside account that we have set up that can only be used for IT purposes. We'll still go and get those quotes and bring it back. We ultimately need to get council approval at a later date to ask to move those funds from that set aside account back into the IT budget to do that work. So there's a great deal of flexibility in what we do or how we do it. I think depending on the specific discussion point, I might have a recommendation on the best way to go about that. Both from an administrative feasibility perspective as well as making sure that it doesn't get rolled up into some other number and then get lost in the shuffle and not ever get used for the intended purpose. So obviously, if we're making changes or allocating additional funding somewhere, I want to make sure that it gets reflected in a way that none of us lose track of it. I don't want things to get rolled up somewhere and then never to be seen again or used for something different. So I guess all that was a long-winded way of saying, depending on the item, Tyler or myself may say, I like that idea, but it might be easier to track or easier to do it if we do it this way, right? And then we can have a conversation around that.
Okay, my questions, so for example, the information technology, that money is kind of a multi-fund, it's not all general fund, is that right? Because it comes from, sewer folks, water folks, all that stuff, is that right? Is that accurate?
The IT department and the set aside account has a variety of different funding sources, but the intent of those funds that are set aside are for IT,
Right.
Equipment. So the infrastructure that we need to operate our IT department.
So like this extra security, is that like you have contractual services for $240,000, can we, what I'm asking is, I get that we're making decisions with general funds, but then if we asked like, let me back up. I would like to see a presentation at some point in the next 4 months about the IT security options and what they cost. And then my thought is that maybe some of that could be covered within this budget so that it's not all coming out of the contingency general fund, but at least half of it's coming out of the contingency. So I'd like, but that's kind of making a decision on funds other than general fund. And then the second one was the pavement management street fund. And that the whole idea, again, having some presentation in the next 3 months or so to kind of talk about, we have, I think, 600 in each year or something, 600,000, something like that.
600,000 for the biennium.
And so, again, having some presentation, I doubt, very seriously, you can get a whole lot of stuff planned for this summer, just because by this time, most paving companies already have their summers full. But to the extent that we can kind of get something going as soon as possible to kind of do some repairs, but then, again, have something presented to us in the next 3 months to kind of, that speaks to that number that we're trying to get, the pavement index number. If we spend this much, we'll get up to this,
lock
or,
it in for
some-
bids in the
just some
future.
options and costs. And just kind of some, I would like to kind of see that in the next 3 months. And that's not general funds, right, necessarily.
No, that's 100% within the street fund. So I
So,
wouldn't
Yeah.
advocate for using general funds for that purpose. I think we've got a street fund with plenty of contingency to
right, and so I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that we should be using any of the general funds for that, but I would like, that noted in the notes, and it's not necessarily allocating additional money in the street fund, but it is kind of asking for some more strategic direction.
With the cybersecurity, upgrades that we've talked about, there's kind of a couple different ways you can go about that. One is to, make a decision now somebody would make a motion to allocate some of that 467, to the IT upgrade set aside fund. And then at a later date, Greg would come in front of council with a presentation of how we propose to beef up our cybersecurity, and then that money would already be set aside to dip into. The other way we would go about it is you could leave money in council contingency, and then Greg would still come before city council with a proposal, and then that money would be sitting in council contingency, then transferred to the IT department.
My second one would be my preference, because I don't know if we're talking, $10,000, $40,000, 400. I have no idea what we're talking about or what the options are. So I would like to kind of, again, have that presented so that we can make that allocation as part of the budget direction, but not identify a number yet.
Makes sense.
And also the direction that, if possible, using some of the existing IT money, if there's any wiggle room in there. And if there's not, then that's good to know too.
I mean, that 75, will just for the group, that 75,000 that we set aside in the IT set aside account was specific to the replacement schedule that Greg has for the IT infrastructure. So, that the intent of that is to be there for this 2-year period. Next biennium, we put another 75,000. And then the following biennium with the 75,000 that would be added that biennium plus the.
But
that
not
gets you to
for add-ons like
225.
cybersecurity.
Not for cybersecurity,
Totally-
that's on the
totally different.
existing infrastructure
Yeah.
replacement schedule that we have,
And
so.
and
That's fine, you leave that alone.
Yeah.
I would also just add that, when Greg builds his, the way it works in the budget process is the indirect departments like IT will say, this is what we need to be able to run our department, and that's what we build into the budget and charge out to all the other departments. And so that contingency, is relatively modest, and it's what's needed truly to come up for like unforeseen things, and so we would certainly want to be cautious about from the get-go dipping too deeply into that contingency to fund something like this.
He doesn't have any contingency plan or and you're not bringing anything over that I can see.
Yeah, he's not bringing forward a beginning balance in IT. There is 15,000 that's in contingency,
In the.
which is pretty close to 2% of that department, similar to our approach for all indirect service departments. Just a very modest contingency. I do think, from my perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense to leave some additional funds in contingency for cybersecurity, just because we don't really know the scope of what that work could look like. There could be some really small improvements, maybe to your point, $10,000-$15,000. There could be something much more significant that gives you a lot more bang for your buck and a lot more, security. And so, my only hesitation around allocating some amount of money now is I don't want that to then be the takeaway that $50,000 fixes our problem or provides the security that we need. And then when we come back and say, actually, it's $80,000 to do that work, the look on the council's face is like, well, I thought that was only 50. And then, so I think
Yes.
leaving it in
History will tell
contingency
us. Yeah.
and just preparing to have that conversation in the next several months makes more sense from my perspective, but and certainly discuss that further.
Has everybody had a chance to look at the things on the last page, well, not the very last page, but the page talking about suggestions from the budget committee? Has everybody read those?
They're sort of in chronological order.
Yeah.
The ones in the middle aren't necessarily dollar amount
They're not
related,
fleshed out.
but I wanted to
they're-
make sure they were captured.
Right.
But it's really the
And there
first
may be
group
some
and the
that-
third group.
There may be some that didn't get your suggestions in and you have now your suggestions. And what I would like to do is maybe starting with Carl, go to all the people who are on the budget committee who aren't on the city council. Get their input about what, if they think it's all great, I like the budget as it is, leave the 467,000 where it is. Let the council deal with it later. Or any suggestions, or if you want to say, I agree with Amelia, we should do something about that. But go to each of the ones who aren't on the city council and then go to each of the people on the city council, and then maybe we'll, in that process, come to some kind of consensus so that we can wrap up and get to the things that are on the last page is how to make a motion. So I will start with Carl.
Me
No,
personally,
no things up necessary because you're gonna get gone too. Unless you don't want to do it that way.
You're on council or last.
And when I get to council, I will go to each council member first and then the mayor last so that we all get a chance to talk and get our wording and go from there. Carl.
Okay, first off, I don't see anything in here I'm really in objection to in terms of the list. There's some questions in my mind, how much, but and also I have some questions about how much the urban renewal dollars will affect these or be added to these.
Not at all.
I disagree with that.
We did last time. I mean, that's how we funded the park, so we did it between. the
Right,
two.
right, but there's some
Right.
street stuff in here too that I probably.
Can you all speak up, please? Like 20 feet away from you. I'm not
Can't hear.
Okay,
Poor acoustics in here.
I pretty much have no problem with any of these on the list, so that's all you need from me, that's, all
Are
I
there
have
any
there.
other that you don't want to do?
No, no, there's nothing in here I don't want to do. But I think there's some conflict between, the add-on we just had with Amelia and, which one is it? Like third from the bottom, we didn't number them. Cutting the funds from the library and now we're adding to make up the funds. Difference between grant dollars and fund dollars. So it looks like that's an argument between the two of them.
Right.
So either way, I'm cool with making sure that I would call it the bookmobile or the mobile
Whatever.
books place is, but I think we've heard that from many people. I think that's great. I do think though that there's an opportunity to supplement some of these things with the urban renewal dollars that makes it's within the urban renewal district, that there is a way to, I don't know, not duplicate, but to be able to add to and make sure that some things are covered. So I look forward to that discussion and making things go that way. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, my main priority would be doing something about the sound system. I don't know what was anticipated in all the other upgrades, but I'd like to see a priority. Having sat in the audience many years in the past and not being able to hear very well. Even at meetings like this, if there were microphones for the council members, it would be very helpful. So that's a big one. And I also like the idea of setting aside enough money for the bookmobile in case the grants are not coming forward. Not having to necessarily decide that tonight, but to make sure there's enough in advance for that.
Like a contingency if they can't get the grants.
Right.
By and large, I think for me, the big focus for this budget would be looking at the economy and going over the next 2 to 4 years. The best case scenario is that we have an uncertain economy. And with that being said, an eye on conserving as much money as possible. So in my mind, 3 things happen when economy becomes uncertain for a city. Squirrel away as much money as possible in contingencies and reserves. Support your local small businesses who are going to get you through, and attract new large commercial businesses who can add to your revenues without increasing funds on your current residents. And so with that, that would be where I would focus most of mine. So I would say focus on keeping as much as possible in the reserves, not to fund smaller projects later, but really to keep it in a contingency for a drop in revenue or to hold over into the next budget cycle. I would be in favor of allocating more funds to the economic development for the reasons mentioned. I would also encourage, maybe not necessarily reflected in the budget, but encourage a look at any vacancies that were to be open or are open and whether or not they are needed. I know Tyler's already kind of mentioned something around this in the past. I know being in a local municipality that is going through layoffs, I would much rather not overhire to make my life temporarily easier in order to have to face downsizing in the future.
Retain. Thank you.
As I suggest, well, first, I should apologize. I thought we were supposed to like take that $467,000 and like chunk it out into individual, like how much we were gonna put in what department. I'm sorry, that was my gaffe.
It's not wrong.
You could certainly do that. Yeah, that is,
You can
That's
do
an
if
that.
you have
That's
a
an option.
proposal for all
Oh,
of
it's
that
not a
funding, you.
mandate, but it's an option.
Oh,
I
can
just-
I
thought-
get a point of clarification? Because I
Sure.
really want to hear what you want to say, but I am confused about what people are saying and what I understood. My understanding and what I thought I was told was the additional money, the rest of the money for the bookmobile, whatever we want to call it, the mobile library, is already in that budget. And there's $50,000 on top of that in there anticipated for a grant. But Sarah, can you just clarify that? That's what, I think it would be helpful to have that more clearly line itemed out.
Right
Because-
now, that $46,000 is coming out of district funds.
What's that?
Right now, that $46,000 is coming out of district funds. So the total needed for Sandy for the mobile library is $96,000. And we anticipate getting somewhere around $50,000 in grants and fundraising, and that $46,000 is in district funds.
And you have the rest of the money from Hoodlin. So you have all the money you need. So this idea that we need to give them more money out of the 467,000, I don't believe is needed. Is that
I
an
think
accurate
what's being
statement to make?
suggested is that 46,000 that's coming from district funds. Based on the input we had at the last meeting and what Amelia said is, they would rather see that 46,000 in district funds spent on programs that might be cut without it. Than,
So basically, you're asking the city residents to buy the bookmobile, except for whatever Hoodlin's throwing in.
or whatever grants are.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm just gonna say there's a huge amount of controversy about that. About spending, about city residents having to provide
Right.
huge
And
things like
that is
this
one thing that will be-
for where we have a district. So
that
that's
will be
kind of where
open
you
for
get a little bit of a
discussion when we
pushback.
get to the discussion part.
Yeah, because we don't have districts on any other thing except for the library.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So.
but thanks for
So
clarifying.
without feeling shut down, please continue.
No, learning opportunities for me. Let's see, what was it? I don't, the only suggestion that I really don't like is I don't want to cut the district funds for the library outreach vehicle. Because to me, the library is really important, and with all those people that came in to do those comments, it felt like we should at least discuss bridging that gap. Because to me, also, grants are not something that is guaranteed. You could write a really beautiful grant application and you could still get a no, thank you, try again next year. And I just want to make sure that the library does have that gap space to get the bookmobile and have all their programs, because I am with you that I would love the library to get more books and do more audiobooks, because I'm a big library user. So I just wanted, that was my suggestion. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think the suggestions, and thank you, Tyler and Tyler, for putting it all together, and for all the staff for coming and presenting. It's not an easy thing, so to do and take some time. I am in favor of setting aside as much money as we can from just being working for another government agency and just seeing where it's good to go, and it's good to have some reserves there. I do see cybersecurity. Obviously, this is my field as well, cybersecurity, and we spend a lot of money at my organization to try to protect ourselves on that. And there is, but when I suggest that when the council has that discussion, you can now legally do it in exec session. You should do it in exec session, because you do not want that on public record of what kind of security you do or do not have. So please remember that is now, you can do that in exec session. And then I'd be in agreement with the bookmobile in being able to put money towards that in keeping programming and things at the library solid. But other than that, I think the rest could be sent to council when the pricing comes up, including the cybersecurity, but rectifying, realizing that what that dollar amount comes to would come to the council to, versus saying, put an arbitrary number on that line item. Wait till there's actual there, but understanding that we all see that as a need. we're gonna want.
And we're gonna go to the city council now, but
We've got our online.
oh, yeah, sorry. Online, Art, did you have anything to add? Or what are your concerns?
Generally, I don't have any concerns, just a minor suggestion as somebody that's new to this process. I get confused by the various references to the aquatic center in the budget. And I suggest we consider calling it something else like the Cedar Park Complex. I think it might send some message that there's some future plan for an aquatic center, which I don't know what that is or might be, but it seems like it's a legacy thing that we might consider changing. That's all.
I totally agree with you. That should be eliminated.
I thought we said that 2 years ago.
It's on here somewhere.
It is
Yeah,
on
it's
there
in the
to
middle
say to
section.
redo
Yeah.
that, yeah,
To rename it.
yeah, suggestion for, yeah. So we're gonna go to the council, but if I can, and if I do this wrong, somebody who already spoke, let me know. Cybersecurity seemed to be mentioned several times. Urban renewal money, possibly using that when we get to the urban renewal budget. Sound system for in here. There seem to be several people that commented on the bookmobile and using maybe additional city funds or maybe trying to get the grants, and if we don't get the grants, then using city funds. And then a couple people wanted to reserve the reserve and invest in economic development. Is there anything I missed? Okay, we'll move on to council, starting with Don, because you're closest.
That works. I, in order, I usually.
Well, I'm just gonna go this way.
Okay, so, a couple things. First of all, I like hearing things even from opinions I don't agree with, so I really do appreciate you advocating for something. And I was obviously not in favor of putting city funds into that, the bookmobile or in that area. But that said, I like to hear things, and sometimes, sometimes I change my mind on stuff like that, because of those opinions, so I appreciate it. The big one for me is, the police department and the lack of budgeting for future vehicles. So this budget doesn't account for any new vehicle replacements. How many are we looking for in the biennium? 4.
7, right?
What?
Well,
Seven?
4 is, I have 7 vehicles that are on rough mileage, but 4 has been the anticipated replacement schedule everybody.
And they're, how much of each?
About 70,000 all in.
Yeah, so I mean, that's more than half our contingency, right, or more of that unallocated money right there.
How many did we get last biennium?
280,000.
Well, we had that set aside, I'm
But
wondering.
how many did they actually buy?
Yeah.
4 plus mine.
Well, 4 and then a used one because we had another one that died. And then we had the grant funding to acquire the additional community services officer vehicle, so. Technically 6, I would argue that 4 were of the vehicle replacement nature.
So my point is, we need to either hold that back. I would like to see, the chair was just asking about the replacement, that capital fund that we're setting up. We didn't do it for the police department this time. So
I thought they
That,
were.
that fund is for the general fund, which would fund police vehicles, and but as you pointed out, there's not
it's
enough
such a
to fund
disproportional,
7 vehicles.
right,
Yeah.
it's a disproportionate amount of money. And there's no transfer line item in. They had 280,000 in the last biennium, 0 in this biennium, so that 75,000 doesn't touch that. So to me, that's nothing. They didn't get accounted for, and we need to hold out probably better than half of our available money to just, because we're gonna spend it. I mean, like it or not, if I have to choose between bookmobile, the sound system, and a police cruiser, we want a police cruiser. So,
Yeah, so let me, if I may, committee member Hopkinson.
put me in my place.
No, not that, I just, there's a larger conversation around police funding that needs to happen. That's part of our sustainability strategy that we've talked about repeatedly, but there's also a council goal to 1.3, continue to implement a traffic safety and speed enforcement program, including deployment of technology that will assist with enforcement and gather accurate speed data in areas of concern within the city. So there are plans for staff to bring back to the council some policy discussions and decisions around speed enforcement, traffic safety programs that may or may not produce additional revenue that can help support.
But where we sit today, they're not here. And I think would be a mistake to allocate all that money in hopes that we pass and get and realize that sort of income or resource. So that's my opinion on that one.
Just a quick aside, as a frequent user and sitter at the light at the Highway 26 and Bluff Road, I would love it if there was a red light camera there. In the last week, I have had at least 3 vehicles run the red light heading east on Highway 26, and if we had a red light camera there, we could have, cha-ching.
Chairman, we got, you look at mining, you look at.
There's a couple of places where. it's
We did talk about
frequent.
that as part of our goal setting in council. Those were. that was
I don't know if
really-
that's legal to do now. But if it is, we should do it.
I think it is. Definitely something the council very much interested in. So that's one of them. The sound systems, actually, I say these cruiser versus sound system, but we need to put the money there just because we got to do it. The last thing that I'll push, if you will, is that I agree with leaving money in contingency in general so that we can allocate it when we need it. The exception being Greg. Greg, he manages to his budget, IT Greg. He manages to his budget. He's dead on. And when we put money in there, it's like a go ahead and do this. And we did it by ending ago for Sandy Net, and I think it worked really well. We ended up with some good things out of that. It drove change. I think we need to earmark 20,000. It might be, as noted, more or less, but I think we have to put it in there to set that priority and make that pin stick for making this work. So that's it for me. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Rich.
Thank you. So I want to say I start out with I agree with Carl. The first time,
I remember agreeing once. In the last 12, 15 years.
but with all seriousness, that, I would really like to see, making sure that we're leveraging our renewal money where we can to help reduce some of these costs. I agree a lot with the fiscal responsibility and the saving for a rainy day and being smart with our money. Therefore, I'm not 100% on the earmarking of money for specific ideas necessarily. I don't have a problem with small amounts, but I do think it should be put somewhere for those things that are going to come up as we know over the next 2 years. In regards to how things are budgeted, there's certain things like our fees, specifically around building and all of that. And that I'd like to see those come up. I don't know. I think I've asked for this before. I don't know if I ever got a question. Are we keeping up with the actual cost of the labor so that each of those departments are truly self-funding? Or are we just simply following the CPI, which may or may not be keeping up? And if that's the case, I think we need to look at those costs. The next thing is the municipal court. And I realize that some of this is really a shell game because, if we were to take the court from the PD and put it under the, that money that the court brings in, take it from the PD and put it into the general fund, essentially we're moving it from one spot to another. But I really don't like the lens of the municipal court going to the police department. I think it could go to the general fund, and I also think the court should self-fund itself with the money that it brings in via those instruments. So those are 2 things I'd like to see in the future that needs to go on. I'm not opposed. I don't have a stance yet on the bookmobile. That seems to be a hot topic. Here's what I will say about that. Is I feel like the last time when we allocated money for that it was with the agreement that there was going to be grants and such to pay for it. I realize that times have changed. Situations have changed, politics have changed, a lot of different changes inevitable and it's happened. But with that being said, I'm not for allocating that money specifically, but again, I'm not gonna say never. But I would like to see over the course of however long, what mechanisms we've at least tried to get money and how much fundraising. I'd really like to see that as a presentation before I would be willing to allocate money specifically for that. And the last thing is under the middle paragraph, the suggestion to provide a discount for utility paying via ACH. I think that needs to be the other way around. The cost is because people are using their credit card. So essentially by giving a 3% discount, we're going to take a hit on the people that are already paying ACH. So we're going to charge actuals for the money, and our water and sewer funds are going to take a hit for the people that are paying ACH because now we're going to be giving them a 3% discount. The real cost to us is for those of us, self-included, that use credit cards. So we'll lose our air miles now. But with all seriousness, again, there needs to be a charge for the convenience of using your credit card, and you can make that decision. But we need to charge for the use of the credit card and charge the flat rate for the use of ACH so that we aren't costing ourselves money in an already needed fund. So I think that covered everything that I wanted to say, at least for now.
I'll just jump in if I may quickly. I think that's an excellent point. That's more of a policy decision for the council, and we can dive back into that in the near future. But yeah, point taken. I just wanted to, put that lens and not necessarily a budget committee, decision on how we allocate our fees or charge those fees, but point taken, and we'll be bringing that back in the future to have a discussion.
Chris?
So I don't have any disagreement with any of the suggestions from the budget committee, other than again, the library outreach vehicle. I disagree with cutting the funds, but I haven't, as Rich just stated, I haven't made it told my mind yet as to what we can do, but I have an idea. I've asked this question several times throughout this process that we've gone through, and I've been a part of a lot of budget processes in my career. And I did a lot of research on a city of our size and what the budget should look like and what our contingency should look like. The contingency for this budget is 13.4%. That's significant. A city of our size, they call between 10 and 15% is normal. Depending upon whether you have stable revenue streams would affect whether you should be on the higher end of that or the lower end. So again, we're at 13.4, and we have a lot of discussion about where some other money should come from. So I just played with some math. I think really coming up with a more cost-effective approach while still preserving adequate flexibility for unseen expenses, which is what all the department heads were suggesting with their brokerages, we could reduce the contingency across the board to 12%. Even if you said I'm wrong and go to 12.4, you'd save somewhere between 1.8 and $2.6 million. And you put that in the general fund revenue basket for the city council. And they could determine all these future programs like the mayor was just talking about. It would absolutely fund the library. It absolutely fund the police department vehicle cruisers. It would absolutely fund a lot of these things on this list that we've been talking about that we don't have the money for. But it would hold the department manager a little more accountable to making sure they streamline their budget process. I've never been a part of a budget process where there were such large contingencies. And I do understand we have large infrastructure needs. So I understand the large budgets in water and wastewater. And I don't understand the small one in IT. I was looking at the integrity of the total and just said, if we just peeled off 1% across the board, 1%, it's minutes, it's peanuts to each department. It would give us $1.8 million to do something with. We have to decide what we do with that today? No. We put that in the fund and we save it for a rainy day. We don't know what's going to happen with our budget next biennium. I'm guessing it's going to go down. We don't have the house sale production that we've had. We don't have the revenue streams we've had. It's going to go down. Why give the department more money? Why not take a little bit more away this time and make it work better, but not put them at risk because we'll still have the money in contingency if it's needed. It doesn't do anything to protect the harm that may come. This isn't about reducing safeguards. It's about striking a smarter balance between preparedness and proactive investment. And I just believe this adjustment will help us do that.
Question for you. So when you say across the board, do you mean general fund or all funds?
General fund,
Just the general.
just the general fund, thank you.
You're saying it's 13.4 in general fund?
Each of the departments within the general.
Yep, total. If you go to page 19, it shows the contingencies, 25.2 million. To the total budget of 188,040, that's the 13.4 I came up with. And if we cut that to either 12% flat or 12.4, either of those numbers, by the way, would be within the 10 to 15 range they say small towns and communities should hold. As long as we have stable revenue streams, which I think we do, we're predicting that for this biennium, there's no reason why we can't be a little more on the conservative side. And again, I'm not saying spend that money, I'm saying just put a reserve so that it can be used if needed for some of these other programs. And it's not gonna hurt the manager's ability to direct his or her business.
Let's add to that. You mentioned we do have the wastewater and the freshwater, but they're actually separate funds and separate contingencies. So they don't even factor into that.
So that's not correct. Page 19 is the citywide roll up. So that includes the general fund and all other funds. That 25 million is reflected.
So that's what I would refer to.
Yeah,
So
so that's
it's
the
referring
whole
to
city.
All the
All
funds.
the-
Yep,
Well, and water and wastewater contingencies are half of that contingency.
Yeah,
fund.
that- so
It's
that's-
70, yeah.
We
right.
need to pull those out when we're talking about it, just because of the nature of those projects.
And then pull out, the street fund is funded with gas taxes. Those are special revenue, dollars that can only be used for street purposes, so you can't really allocate those anywhere else. Transit is another one of those, special revenue fund. There's a transit tax that's very explicit on what you can and can't use those funds for. The Parks Capital Fund, similar thing. Those are SDCs and land, fee in lieu of land charges, so you can't allocate those out to other things. So when you look at just the general fund, the total contingency in the general fund, our 5% bare minimum that we have, the individual department contingencies, as well as this $467,000 is 2.7 million.
I'm confused because it says on page 19, it says, it's 25.8 for the whole thing. And then it says, of that 16.8 is, water and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're saying that all these other things are also SDCs and streets and is that what you mean?
You can't
Yeah.
throw them into contingency.
So, we highlighted that there's $16.8 million in water and wastewater because those are the two largest, right? That's where the 95% of our capital spending is coming out of. So those were just the big numbers that we're drawing attention to. That's what makes up the 16.8 million. But you've got 2.6 million in streets that can only be used for streets, 800,000 in transit that can only be used for transit, almost 7 million in parks capital that can only be used for parks. So I mean, you really start to whittle down the flexible contingency for
That sounds good.
general city discretion.
But the money that you're spending for the individual departments, so say street fund, for example, and I don't know the dollars on it specifically, but you have a contingency for street fund. And if that number, if you, hypothetically, if you're taking 1% from that fund, you can't use that money in any other discretionary way for the general fund, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the state shared gas tax that we get and the city's gas tax have very prescribed uses of what they can be used for. It's maintenance and expansion of city
So
roads, a
on
certain
page
percentage towards
19,
like
the
sidewalks.
contingency is 25 million. On page 20, which is the general budget summary, it's 2.721.
And
That's the one.
and that's the total flexibility within the general
Within the
fund.
general fund,
Yeah.
yeah. You can see it all, hang on just 1 second, please, Kelly. You can see on page 22 of your paper document, 27 of the PDF electronically. Is a summary of it's titled here as projected ending balance. You could also call that contingency. So that second column are all of the contingency amounts throughout every fund and throughout every department. So you get the 2.7 million in the general fund in that top section.
Which page
And
are
then-
you on?
22 of the
22.
paper document.
Okay.
It's the same one it's on.
Now that we're there, can we start over?
Yeah. So on page 22, you've got this broken out between general fund and all other funds. The general fund is in the top section. The third column, second column of numbers, but the third column on the table is titled projected ending balance. That's synonymous with contingency. Really, this is just presenting it in a different way, but you got your $2.7 million for the general fund. Everything in that lower category where you see streets, transit, soon to be renamed Aquatic Recreation Center Fund, parks, water, wastewater, all of that, those are funds that are, you know, specifically earmarked for specific things or dictated by ordinance or state law or some other mechanism, right? So those really can't be touched and used at the discretion of the city. They have to be specific to what that revenue was intended for.
So,
It's 2.7 minus 290,000. Because the building fund can't be flexed out either.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So
We're like 2.4 million.
the building department is self-sustaining. It doesn't receive general fund money. It's totally dependent upon you know,
Application.
building permits and applications. And state law requires that those, you know, any excess funds in the building department be set aside and only used for building department functions, right? We want that rainy day fund in the event that development does dry up, but you still have, you know, random additions or fire inspections or fire life safety things that need to happen. You need a building official, and so the remodels. And so that contingency really is, you know, that rainy day contingency.
So they fight, but they fight in their contingency then based upon revenues expected. And then you're using that contingency to offset if you have variations in that expected revenue stream for that biennium, for that specific department.
Yeah.
That's not transferable.
If you're talking about building, yes, that.
Right, something like that.
Yep.
But it would be the same for, I get you, same,
Yeah.
same for the street. Or the gas tax you're talking about, it comes in because you're just basing that off of anticipated revenue. And so you can't really flex their contingency line. Unless you have a line item you're gonna spend that money on that's preserved.
Yeah.
But you could then look at that 2.7 million that we have earmarked, that's the flexible money.
2.4.
well,
Or, sorry, 2.4 minus the building.
Yeah, yep.
And what percentage of that is of the total budget for those departments? You said, was that 5%?
It's gonna be about 6, between 5 and 6.
Which is not anywhere close to the 10 to 15.
Yeah, so our policy is 5%. I think if my memory serves, I think we're at like 5.16% right now. Maybe slightly higher than that. If you roll in all the other contingencies, it was, well, I can't give you a number because that included the building fund. Less than 10, more than 5 is my off the cuff response.
Can I put a pin in this just for a split second? Chair,
Well,
if you
it's
want.
your turn next, so.
Well, I don't,
No,
are
I'm
you
done,
done?
I'm done,
I have to get on a
listening.
call at 7 o'clock and I'm gonna
Okay.
be super fast and the call shouldn't take very long. Hopefully I'm back in just a few minutes. I'm gonna agree with both Darren and Rich, as odd as it might be. That I'm much more in favor of holding on to that entire contingency. We've got an uncertain growth model in the city over the next several years. The economy is very uncertain. I'm also not super in favor of adding any positions to the city over the course of this biennium. But my 2 cents would be that we keep that contingency and look at what comes down the pipe that we don't know is coming. So I shall be right back.
You'll get more time when you come back.
That's okay.
Just
No
one.
problem. Thanks.
I just have put a quick clarification. So you got the $2.4 million. The total general fund is 13.964. So don't you take the 2.4 and divide it by the 13.964 to get the percentage of contingency?
The total general fund is 42.967. The 13.964 is just the general revenue component, so your property taxes, franchise fees, beginning balance of the overall city, but the total general fund, when you include police and library and gosh, there's a whole lot more that I'm drawing a blank on, admin, HR, you know, IT, economic development,
42,967.
planning, it's 42.9 million. Which you can see on page 21.
So if we leave our unallocated funds in there, it comes out to 6.45%, 6.45% with that large chunk.
Christina.
Well,
I've only been on council 4 months. And this is a really eye-opening experience. I budgeted my home and my family. I've never done a budget of this magnitude. It's a lot. But it's really eye-opening, and going almost last is a really good thing too, because a lot of good things have been brought up.
You just say, I agree with you, I don't agree with you.
Yeah, well, no, I won't do that. But I wrote a few things down as we were going, and being fiscally conservative, I believe, is where we need to be. Because like Rich, I believe Darren and Lori said, we don't know what's going to come at us and how much it's going to cost. There's a lot of uncertainty. And we already have so much on our plates with everything else we're budgeting for. Particularly water, wastewater, those sorts of things. Those are huge obstacles that the city needs to face. And there's a lot of unknowns that I think having that money in reserve, I would feel more comfortable being able to access that when someone needs it, or a department needs it, or something large happens that we need to be able to take care of. I think boosting the economic development is also very something I'd really like to do. I know we have a couple of company owners who'd like to bring living wage jobs to the city. There's a stumbling block because of the ERUs and that sort of thing. I would love to see us support economic development existing that we have access to, and somehow finding a way to bring at least the 2 people that I'm thinking of who will have jobs. It's gonna take a couple years to get those built in. And so that's something we need to kind of focus on, bringing that to Sandy. With the moratorium, we're in a halt right now, but that will change. And we're a very desirable city to live in, and I think we need to support that and get support for that, get people excited to live in Sandy. And we have a lot of stuff that's not exciting that we have to deal with. The other thing I want to touch on is the library funding. You know, I've sat through all the meetings, I've listened to everything, and I'm a little confused how it kind of got suggested that funding would be cut. We've been very generous to the library historically, $150,000 the last biennium for the bookmobile, which I think is a really great outreach thing. I just don't think it can be an open checkbook when things fall short, because it's not everyone. It's the city residents who are on the hook for that. That's why we have a library district. And if we need to build that out better and make it stronger, that's what we need to do, because the library needs to be there. I think we all agree. But we need to have a more stable way to fund it and not thread it together and braid it together when things get tough. And I'm not sure what that would look like. But I don't think that it's fair always for the city to, I mean, there was $150,000 for the bookmobile last biennium. The cost, I believe, was $96,000, and there's $46,000. I believe the total was in shortfall. So whether my math is bad, but $150,000, whether it's biennium or not, that should have bought the bookmobile. Yeah. Fiscally responsible. Things are gonna come up that we can't put in print. We're not gonna see a line for it, and it's gonna be our responsibility to make it work. And we have to have the funds to do that if it does.
Forgive me, is the covered basketball over the covered court, is that in this, is this included in the budget or is it not?
It is not included in the budget currently. So for a little bit of background, sorry to go into the weeds here. We had a conversation at a recent council meeting. The council prioritized moving forward with putting the deposit down on that. Part of, I think, the funding strategy, for lack of a better term, on paying for that covered basketball is dependent upon the budget process, dependent upon where SDC collections come in throughout the remainder of this biennium. How do I want to phrase this?
Potential shortfalls is what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna phrase it differently than that. There is a variety of different places where the funding for that could be pieced together, whether additional SDC collections, whether there's some current city council contingency allocated to it, whether there is some of this $467,000 that's allocated to it. But I think the takeaway is that there is funding available for that. It's just sort of, making that patchwork quilt, for lack of a better term, of where that comes from. But it is not explicitly budgeted for in this budget as it's presented.
Okay, thank you. I love the idea of keeping the entire contingency. I think we all love the library and we all love all of the programming, all the things you do, but I would love to see how grants flush out before there's any more money that is allocated at this time, because I think there's lots of potential there. But yeah, I'm in favor of keeping the contingency at this time.
Don't even.
It's next, right?
No, Kathleen's next.
Linda, you haven't gone yet.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I'm
was
gonna
gonna
go,
say,
I'm
when
gonna
is
go after you. Because then I'll have everybody's thing that I can comment on, if that, that's my prerogative since I'm the chair. You have the prerogative when it's a council meeting, but I'm gonna take that prerogative now so that I can see where the focus needs to be.
There's the gavel right there.
She's got it. Okay. I'm just gonna I don't have it all. I like to kind of have all my stuff written down, so I saw. This is numbers. For the library, one of the things I am planning to do, because I got named to this new task force. And my intent is to get the funding formula relooked at, because Sandy, Malala, Estacada, and Canby, and even Gladstone are the lowest funded libraries, to the tune, like I said, in the past. I think it's like, Malala's getting 28, we're getting 32. Lake Oswego's getting, a whole lot more, 75 per person. So it's like by a magnitude of, double and triple the amount of money per person in the library districts. And so the other thing to kind of, I would like to have a workshop with the library stuff, just for all of us to kind of understand it better, because it's very confusing. And I feel like I've spent days going through everything, but the county funds the library, and we've got, over $3 million, plus the Hoodland budget is what? 1.9?
I don't have the numbers.
Okay, yeah, something like that. Anyway, but the way so my intent is to get our library more money, and the way that is gonna work is the county's on a single year budget cycle, and so we do have the potential to affect change, not this coming year, but in 26, 27. So I'm hopeful that we can get our library more money. So I'm supportive of that, but for the bookmobile or the mobile library, I feel like we put $150,000 of city money towards the district. I expect that mobile is going to be going through Sandy Block, but I think a lot of its benefit is going, to the schools, to the mountain, and outside outside in the areas where people can't easily get to the library, which is outside city limits generally. And so because of that, I am really protective of using a lot of money. I do believe that our general fund does need to kind of throw some more, even though we're already paying for the district. I don't have a problem adding more general fund to it, but I do get concerned about this bookmobile because it's a $300,000 vehicle that is expected to last about 10 years, I was told. And so I'm a little, plus there needs to be this extra staffing. I mean, we're not going to be hiring new people, but it's going to take some of the staffing away from our libraries to help staff it. And obviously it's got some operations and maintenance costs and all that. And so I think it's a wonderful thing, but I think that I'm a little bit reluctant to kind of take general fund money away from Parks and Rec and Sandy Net and things like that in order to hand it to the district, because we're already paying for the library building. We're paying for heavy maintenance of the library building. We're paying for mortgage. We're paying, and we're putting some more general fund in. So again, I want to get more money for our district, but I'm not supportive of putting even more money. And that said, though, and one of the other biggest reasons is because, you know, I see the Parks and Rec folks knock it out of the park. Well, who's the queen of grants is Andy. I mean, she gets millions and millions of dollars in grants for the transit. But the police got $200,000 for a county grant. And the Parks and Rec folks have gotten, I think, I don't know, $800,000 in grants or something like that. And so, you know, when we're talking about like less than $150,000 in grants for the library, I believe that, you know, there's the ability to get that. I mean, and it sounds like we really don't need, we need about 96 or something, because Hoodland is putting in some money. So I'm really excited about it, but I do believe that we do need to kind of, you know, make a real concerted effort and just keep, you know, dialing for dollars is kind of how I put it. You cannot win if you do not play, and just kind of keep pushing for more grant funding for that, because it's a very much a white hat project. So that's the whole library thing. That's my take on that. The police, I kind of agree with Dawn regarding, because what I see is that the police budget went up, oh, I don't know, about $1.2 million from last year. And I think that includes the 300,000 that we gave you on top of last year's allocation for the additional officer and all the body camera and extra gear. Very supportive of that. But now what's happening is that I see that you used $280,000 last year to buy at least 4 vehicles. That's what you had set aside. And now we have, like I said, $1.2 million more money in the fund for police, and yet, but no money for cars at all. And we're supposed to be getting 4 to 6 more cars. What's the budget for your set aside vehicle thing? I think you only had $150,000. So that's not gonna even get you, you know, 2 cars hardly. So my concern is that, you know, first of all, I hope Parks and Rec doesn't need any, or whoever else, or the, whatever you call the pool vehicles or whatever. I hope they don't need a vehicle, because it sounds like, you know, police are always gonna be first in line. And I believe that our budget does need to show, you know, for each department, what the true cost of that department is, including the vehicles, 'cause it is such a big cost. I don't know how you do that, you know, move money, you know, make them line item and say these are for vehicles, or I don't care how you do it, but I do think that if they need, you know, if they're gonna take all the $150,000 we have and that doesn't affect all the other departments, then I think that they need to take the other 2 vehicles.
Electronic notifications.
Talking, Leroy.
On Tuesdays, there's a chance of being here in the same.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute Arts.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so I think, you know, I don't see us getting more money. You know, I think that's gonna have to come out of the budget, you know, out of the police budget, at least for 1 or 2 more vehicles, because I don't see us throwing another, you know, $300,000 or 280 for vehicles on top of that. Then, let's see, I do, we had $200,000 left over after we gave 300 to police, and I support that being allocated to fund the covered structure. That's last budget's money. And then go getting, you know, we've got some options to cover the rest of the bill with that. With a lot of different options, so we'll get the rest of that covered with, you know, it may, you know, we'll figure out how to get that covered.
Yeah, I think there's I don't want to say robust, there's a conversation we had with just the council on the remaining funding needed for that we can iron out pretty quickly.
I do, the only other thing that I would add in here that I would like to see us do, because it's just come out on Facebook here this last week. But I know some of you guys have heard about this whole kind of base camp ambassador program, but it's my belief that we really need to have a group of organized volunteers down at the Cedar Park to help just be welcoming people, be keeping an eye on things, helping a little bit with park maintenance on the side when our folks aren't there. And just basically kind of trying to kind of encourage voluntary compliance with the rules. And, you know, there's a lot of training that you can do. I've done a program like this in the past, and they're very successful. The Trail Keepers of Oregon has a program. They took our program from the Forest Service and made it their own. And then I kind of took some of the stuff from them and took it back and kind of have formulated some stuff with Rochelle. But I believe that I think what's needed for that program is having some t-shirts and hoodies, having some, we've talked about like giving out little coupons or whatever for a Slurpee or something like that for the kids that do have helmets, to try to kind of that carrot approach to things. So I would like to see, maybe $10,000 a year, $20,000 total set aside for kicking off that program, because I think I think we are going to need some more code enforcement down there with our new position. But I also believe that the users down there can be kind of engaged as stewards of that park to kind of help deal with some of the Yahoo behavior.
Well, and they have a vested interest in preserving it.
Right. So I would ask for $20,000 to be kind of set aside for that, for the biennium. And the council chamber stuff, I'm, gonna go get my hearing screened. I'm sure it's not great, but yeah, I would love to see us get just some microphones in here. Thank you.
So, since we split this up from the Renell budget, what I would ask you with is of these things that everyone has listed, and I will say how I feel about them, but if there's anything within this list of things that could be legally, justifiably, or financially able to be funded with urban renewal dollars, if you could just put a little check by those things so that when we get to the urban renewal budget, because I kind of agree with those people that, reserve the reserves. We don't know what's coming down the line. And as far as the bookmobile, I'll give my 2 cents on that. You may call it a white hat thing, but I don't see a whole lot of federal dollars. There may be some foundation dollars that, in order to make up for the lack of vision on a national level, will give money to library projects. But from federal grants, I don't see them giving any money to bookmobiles or to outreach for education or for, cultivating a more intelligent youth or any of that stuff. I don't see that happening. So while it's a white hat thing, it might be something that's low on the priority list for giving money to right now. So it might be tough to get the money that's necessary.
These would be private grants and state grants.
Yeah, but who knows if they're getting cut off from their funding, how much they're gonna have left over to dole out to the lower levels. So all more reason to keep that money in contingency so that we don't end up with a point where we've spent $150,000 of city money. And then it comes up short because we don't get the full 50,000 in grants that we're budgeting, getting grants. Or, I don't want to have it not be able to roll out because there's not the money either in the district funds or in the grant funds to make it happen. So that would argue for leaving the 467 or whatever part of it doesn't get allocated elsewhere. To where at that time, the decision can be made. Okay, are we gonna park it? Or are we gonna give 46,000 and hope for grants in the future to make up the difference? Or are we gonna use, contingency
That's a
for
really
it?
good point, because the donors aren't getting funded, they give the grant.
Yeah, there's people being cut off left and right. You just watch the news and, you get scared. But whatever we can fund out of, I know that there's gotta be a way to fund economic development out of the urban renewal fund. So if we want to spend money filling up blank spaces or getting more high wage job employers in town, we can spend money from the economic fund, from the urban renewal dollars to make that happen. And urban renewal money isn't as restrictive. It has some restrictions, but bringing in jobs is part of the whole reason for urban renewal dollars. So if we need to do economic development, which I think was echoed by several people here, doing it from urban renewal instead of from that 467,000, seems like a better way to do it. And I also think that, the way that some of the public stays informed is watching meetings that happen in this space. And I have watched them online and I have watched them, and not heard what's being said. So it doesn't have to be state of the art, best sound system ever, but it needs to be improved. And, yeah, that's what I would say. And like Jeremy said, we probably should do something with cybersecurity, but I wouldn't allocate even 20,000 to it until we have the bid. And that's all gonna be done in an executive session where he tells us what we need and how to do it. And that can be handled by the city council, so leave it in the contingency until that time. And that's where I stand. So with that in mind, Tyler, if the stuff that can come out of urban renewal, do we want to take each of these suggestions or ideas and handle them by a, one bit, one motion at a time, saying I want to include that and vote on it? I want to take 46,000 from general fund and do that. Vote on it, it gets voted up or down.
And that's gonna be the cleanest for us to track what has support and what doesn't.
Okay.
It might take a little bit longer going
Well, I
item
will-
by item, but I think.
Well,
it's gonna
I will
be
go through the
cleaner.
item by item and we'll take a vote. First off, why don't we have someone make a motion on one of the items?
Sure, just quick, so would you like a
Sure.
running tally
Give me a
of
running tally.
the amount of money left as we make these motions?
Sure.
Or, would that be helpful?
We'll wait till the motion's passed. but
Sure,
yeah.
of course,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Do you even know what that is though? I mean,
That's what I'm.
It's all a-
So-
Some of them, we don't know how much it would
I've heard
cost.
Well, it
specific
depends on
dollar
the
amounts
motion.
on a couple of things. I've heard
What?
specific dollar amounts tied to cybersecurity. I've heard
But we,
specific,
that's the 20,000,
Right.
we don't know.
but I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
throwing out what I've
Yeah.
heard actual dollar
Yeah,
amounts.
it's-
So I-
it's still
I've heard
interesting.
that.
You're talking about
That could tell.
allocating, asking for a motion to set aside $20,000 for security, right?
So-
IT security.
So
Someone
just
could
asked a
make a
question,
motion,
I wasn't
I move that we leave the whole 467,000 in contingency for the city council to deal with later.
So point of order.
Yeah.
So third, listen, let's make sure we understand what chairs asked these to do. So we're gonna vote essentially on line item changes.
There's only about 7.
And then at the end of that, we'll make a formal motion for the whole shebang or? will these
Adopt the budget as
individual ones-
amended
Okay, because the reason I say that is because
or
you know,
modified.
deal making and how things go, the first part might change my earlier vote, so I would appreciate the chance to vote for the entire thing as a package once we. go
Well, yeah,
through.
you'll have the thing.
Okay.
Yes, that's, I should clarify what my support or recommendation was. Talk about each of those items individually so we can see what has support or what doesn't have support. One motion to encompass all of the amendments as one thing.
However, what if one thing has 8 people that would vote for it? And everything else wouldn't even get a second.
We'll just look to everybody wanting to go home tonight.
Then it's, then it's just too muddy. I think if there were 20 things we were voting on, yeah, but there's only about 7 things.
But a lot of these, we don't know how much money they're,
I think
so I'm confused.
I think.
Well,
Well,
that's
if
the
you don't
point
know
that I
how
was
much money it
getting
is,
at.
you're
I would
voting to
rather-
keep it all in
Let me
contingency.
finish my part. Well, I would rather just keep it in contingency and then have those folks do the additional legwork to determine, make a proposal, go to Lux and the 3 Bears. One's kind of the low end, one's the, get us a good deal and, whatever,
The only thing we should be voting on are things we know how much money it's gonna be.
Okay,
Which I
don't see anything.
I only heard 2 things. I'm just gonna get my point out here really
Yeah.
quick. I only heard 2 specific dollar amounts thrown out. $20,000 for cybersecurity and $20,000 for a Cedar Park ambassador program or something titled
Right.
close to that effect.
And 46,000.
And yeah, thank you,
That's right.
46,000 for the library, mobile library, bookmobile.
But we
I
don't
know,
need,
whatever we're
we
calling
don't
it.
know that we need that yet.
So,
It still could be a motion.
But those are the 3 things that have dollar
Okay.
amounts. Everything else is very
Yeah.
conceptual, right? Conserve as much as possible, doesn't have a dollar amount.
Right.
Police vehicles, I think there's a larger conversation around
I'll give you a
around
dollar
that
amount when
still.
my turn comes.
What's that?
I will give you a dollar amount when my turn comes.
Okay.
Well, it's me, your turn right now.
I ask for just a point of clarification, because we talked about moving various things to urban renewal, but let's talk economic development. Let's say money set aside for attracting new businesses. Could that money actually be used for, let's say, 362nd and Bell, or is that outside urban renewal?
That's inside the urban renewal district, so about 90% of our business area is within the urban renewal district.
Not all Bell Street is though, right? Most of it is. The big-
Most of Bell Street is, there's a section from kind of the lower half of that arc.
But
to the
theoretically,
old
we could
terminus.
attract for the rest of it, and if they happen to end up there, oopsie.
Yeah, no, you're attracting it to the place.
I think that's how we would
Yeah.
handle it.
Yeah.
Check. Thank you.
But I'll also, I mean, my understanding is that we've got the economic consultant, we've got 150,000 set aside, plus the money in the general fund where the consultant kind of help us
Yeah.
and extra money for that, and then we've got that, you know, when a project presents itself, and plus we have $400,000 for the facade, you know, in the grant program. And so there's that already set aside, and then you've got the bulk of it put in the contingency for if something comes up, which hopefully will after our consultant work.
And that's been the key in this proposal was let's get the consultant on board and actually identify what the priorities are and figure out what the need is. And then at that point, when we have a better, you know, not a concept, but like an actual plan, we can then identify how much funding is needed for, you know, phase 2 or iteration 3 or whatever you want to call that, to advance the actual economic development work. Yeah.
Okay, Rich.
It seems like in listening to everyone in here, that there's a pretty good consensus that the 467 be put into council contingency.
You can speak louder.
Yeah, it seems to listening to everybody in here that there's a very good consensus that the 467 be put into council's contingency. So I would like to make a motion that we start there, and I'll make a motion that we put the $467,000 available into council contingency. And then we can go from there.
I will second the motion.
And and
Is there any discussion?
We can allocate it after that.
Yeah, I would just say that the discussion here about some of our priorities should maybe be some recommended guidance to the council when they're deciding. So
you said the
that
priority should be
less.
forwarded to the council, is that what you said, Jan?
Priorities we've
Priority
listed.
should be forwarded to the council for what the council.
Yeah,
What the
for our
committee,
discussion.
Joel said, yeah.
What's your hang up, Don?
Well, number one, by going with the motion on the whole budget committee, you sidestep all the discussion we just talked about having.
But have had.
And it just got seconded.
discussion.
We have had my thing up and I have not.
Okay, well, I apologize. I wasn't trying to skip you. I'm just wondering what the hang up is on that, especially since on council, we're gonna have the final control on that anyways.
It's fair.
To devote to count to wherever it chooses to go.
Well, I'm saying your secondary discussions now, you have had a discussion in the overall discussion at the very first of council. So what do you have discussion as far as not doing the 467?
The issue is, what is a contingency? Contingency is a future event or circumstance which is possible but cannot be predicted with certainty. We can absolutely with certainty know that we need police vehicles, which is why they're not contingencies. They should be earmarked accordingly, and whether it's something should go there. We've got.
But we don't
two-
have a timeline or a
We
direct
have two
cost
bienniums
either.
worth of cost to base our estimates on.
But if we buy them now and the other vehicles have 2 years left, then we bought 2 years in advance, which the equipment will be obsolete by the time those other two
Not
die.
saying buy, so we budget. So we budget, we're spending roughly 200,000
280.
the last biennium and 170 something the biennium before that. So you're over 200,000 every biennium for cars, and that's gonna stay the same. We can count on it.
So are you saying that we should only put 190,000 into council contingency and put the rest into a line item on the police budget for cars?
And here's the reasoning for why, because to Rich's point, he's right, council can do all that. The problem is if we don't earmark things we know, this council or a future council may want to do something else with it, and we forget, and sometimes we spend our contingency more than once.
But isn't that why we transfer councils when we do and have elections, so that we get different people with different opinions and different views?
I just want to make sure
to
that
have the votes.
we don't have broken down police cruisers on the side of the road.
Okay, I have a question, a clarification question, Don, on that. And more to Tyler. I'm confused because it feels like if we only set aside $150,000 for extra vehicles and we're hearing that there's 280, somebody hasn't budgeted their needs.
As we discussed, this new asset management set aside thing is immature. We don't have good dollar. There's not a good asset management program feeding into those numbers yet. So it was a guess. I think we called it a swag at some point in terms of those first numbers and going up. What I'm calling out is this particular department, for this particular department was underfunded. It's not a contingency. It will happen. So we should plan for it.
We should plan for it or they should plan for it?
We're the budget committee. Now, yes, I wish those numbers would have come in, okay, but it's not the first time police requests have come in underfunded. Historically, that's been an issue, and as a council in the past, we have added to that budget.
They kind of know that even if they come in underfunded, they will always be funded. They're the police.
You have to, which is why it's not a contingency.
Lindy.
There was some discussion about an alternate source of police funding, right? If we allocated money toward these police vehicles and we had an alternate source of funding, is that earmarked and we can't use it for anything else?
The council could at that point do another budget adjustment and
Take it back.
shuffle things around. I mean, that's why we didn't budget it in the police department.
This
And
wasn't
been
an
transparent
oversight.
around, we know this isn't enough money, but there's other conversations that need to happen at the council level over the next several months. Not specific to just police, but financing and funding and fiscal sustainability as a whole. And so at my direction, we didn't build in certain things that sure need to be purchased at some point in the biennium, but there's another step that needs to happen before that purchase gets made. Which is, you can agree or disagree with that approach, but the message has not been our police vehicles are rock stars and they're not gonna have any issues over the next 2 years. It's been, we have some money set aside of $150,000 that was seed money to a vehicle replacement fund. We have other contingency for emergencies, and we have this other larger conversation around police funding that we need to have. So.
Thank you.
I do have one point. Nationally, there may be federal funds for beefing up our police department, maybe not our library, but they might be willing to beef up the cars to our police department.
Aren't there grants for police vehicles? Are there grant?
I have not seen one. yet.
Okay, all right.
But that seems to be maybe the direction we're heading, so. Kathleen, I think you were next.
Oh.
Or did you not put it down?
No, I just forget what I'm gonna say when it's 10 minutes later. So my understanding of the police fee is that it's this includes the proposed $1 increase, correct?
Correct.
So just doing the math on the back of this envelope, that gets us, $1 gets us $123,000. So. I guess. But that's all been put into salary and nothing in for vehicles. And so I'm just wondering whether or not you need to, propose including the vehicles, covering the vehicles, or at least, half the vehicles with that money.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you a little bit more of a long-winded answer, apologies in advance, but the initial concept of the public safety fee was to offset the salary and benefit costs of 2 officers. And so that's what we've increased the fee to cover, 2 salaries and all the benefits and roll-ups. What that does not include is vehicle and equipment. If you were to include vehicle and equipment in that assumption, and assuming a 5-year replacement schedule for vehicle and equipment, we'd be looking at another $15,000 per year per officer. So in this proposal, you'd need another $60,000 to cover that, which is approximately another 50 cents on the utilities.
So what the point I was gonna make, and this goes to what Rich has kind of raised in the past, but you know, and what you all talked about, other funding mechanisms as far as, you know, red light cameras, whatever they are. But we've also talked about different safety fees for different kind of businesses. Apartments versus, you know, like Mountain Mocha versus Fred Meyer's, you know. How many times does the police go to Mountain Mocha? How many times do they go deal with shoplifters and Fred Meyer's? And so all those kind of things are being discussed or are going to be discussed here in the near future. And so I would like to make a proposal, maybe a motion that says, let's kind of get you know, kind of the information and proposals firmed up for, you know, these other funding sources.
Yeah.
Along with any proposed increase in safety fees before we start adding more money for vehicles, because I think there might be money for these extra vehicles with these other approaches. I just kind of want to see.
And that would be a motion you would make after we're done dealing with the motion and second that's on the floor right now.
Right, I mean, it may require that we take some money out of the contingency. I prefer not to, but if we need to, we can. But I also, you know, I mean, they have the ability to kind of raise some more money in another way without biting into the general fund. So I prefer to see, let's, you know, have some proposals of what more we can bring in these other areas that will help cover the needs for the vehicles.
Carl.
I think you had one over here, Tim.
Oh, I just have a really basic question because I'm getting really confused. For the contingency, leaving alone the $467,000, that means the library can go to it if they do fall short, as long as they bring backup, or the parks can go to it if they fall short in something. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody can, like, the library's not being cut out, because I didn't understand. I thought we had to put this money somewhere in each individual department. That's why I thought we had to chunk it all out. So I guess it was just me being a little muddled, so I apologize, but thank you.
It's so confusing.
This is the only time you'd want to chunk it out, well, there's other ways, but if you thought that it would not be received well at the city council and you wanted to make sure it got funded, you might want to chunk it out and say, no, as a budget committee member, I'm not sure that would get funded by the council. I want to make a motion to fund it at this level.
Right, you can, because you have non-council people here to get the right.
They still
authority.
outnumber
You can
us.
force something to go, but you can force something to go. You only need a couple council members to make you know, on your side if the whole budget committee goes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we built out phase two.
If there, you know, we ended up carrying over 500,000. We spent the 300,000 of that 500 contingency, like the last 3 months of the biennium.
They saved that in case something happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amelia did.
You had something else. No, I just was gonna make a random comment that maybe for us new budget people or committee people that have never sat up there, maybe there should be like an introductory packet that goes, hi, this is how this works.
Well, this is
Yeah.
You get.
Budget training.
This whole concept of allocating out the excess or additional, you know, revenue is convoluted and
In the
unique
past,
to
we did
Sandy.
that.
So not only Sandy, but this isn't like a widespread practice.
Oh.
So
Jeremy, this not allocating it out is more of a recent occurrence, because in the past, 20 or 30 years ago, we did allocate out what was left.
We
The
did.
priorities of the budget committee.
And there was a few years ago when a
was about
prior
6 or
city
8 years ago.
manager allocated everything and then
Yeah.
we weren't too happy because we're like, wait,
What are we
What do
gonna
we
do
do?
when something happens? Yeah.
it's a balancing act.
Carl.
Nice thing about going last, whoever was always there, is that most of the conversations cover some of the things I was concerned about too. But I'm glad that Amelia brought that up, because this is really, I think, in terms of the motion that's on the table right now, and you have put it all into contingency, and then you're gonna end up spending some of these, no matter what. Those four, whatever it is, number of cruisers that you're down determined that you're gonna have to replace. That's somewhere around half of your 467.
It's
Like it or not, and I suspect it will get spent, I guess.
more than half.
Like, true. And then your other things, the mobile library, whatever the mobile library is, and the Cedar Park and whatever, the cyber things, those are all probably gonna be spent anyway. But I do believe it's worth it to put it into the contingency. Wait until you have a budget of some kind that says, we're gonna spend $26,000 on cybersecurity rather than the 20,000. Because that's something that Greg will be able to bring to the council when it's appropriate time. So for me, I think it's right that I would be in discussion about the motion that's on the table, is put it into contingency and then spend it as a priority, because this is what the priority is for the council, from the
But,
committee.
yeah, what if they don't need the cruisers for a year and a half and you've already spent it on cybersecurity and sound system? And there's not 280 left.
It happens all the time. And I've been on council long enough before this
Yeah.
to know that things change. And that we will have,
So you don't want to
whatever it is
earmark.
happens, you may only have to buy 2, maybe you'll have to buy 5 cruisers, but that's the council's job to figure out how to spend that money. But to me, this list that we've been talking about sounds like on the motion docket to vote for,
Yeah.
is the priority that the committee would send as a recommendation to the council, spend the money in this contingency this way,
Right.
as it's
But it's
known.
only adopted as the motion was, put the 467 into there, and then we can add to it recommendations of how the budget, they've all sat through this, they know how the budget committee would like to see us spend it.
I thought,
And you can show up to city council meetings and say, this is one of the priorities of the budget committee, are you gonna back it or not?
I thought that's what we were headed for.
Well, we've gotta take a vote on the motion in a second,
Motion's
but we also have another card up here.
Go ahead, no, please go there.
I'd just like to kind of agree with Carl in that I think moving it all in there is great, but I think there is some division amongst us in that priority set as far as using this as a set of priorities versus, which is great, and they're all worthy causes, but there's also those of us who just want to have it sit there and wait to see what that next budget cycle looks like and make sure that we actually have enough money to get through this one without spending it on $20,000 items, $60,000 items.
So you were probably pretty happy with the way they kept it in there last time and didn't spend it until a few months before the budget was
Yes,
up.
where we can see what this
What we
budget
have
looks like versus, just moving it to council for it to be a council fund or off of this priority list, so. Thanks.
Rich.
I just want to note that the last contingency, 300 and some of that went to the police department. Also to remind us that was as a result of a staffing study that we paid for at the start of the budget cycle, right? That we didn't know the outcomes of it till then. So I hope that we've demonstrated that we are thoughtful in our thoughts and where we want to go. I 100% agree with you that this needs to be a county thing. In fact, I think for the last 2 or 3 days I've been on, specifically around the police department, I've been asking for a rotation of cars and to start building that rotation so that it can be a plan and a program
We've done
expense
that
moving
before
through
and it
that.
just fell apart.
Yeah, it's not there now.
Yeah.
So, and then with the addition of new officers and all of that, I really am. One of the issues I have with the public safety fee, and I realize this isn't the place for discussion, but I do think that it's not responsible funding to strictly allocate for the personnel cost. Knowing that part of that cost for that FTE is the equipment. And I mean that with not just with police department, I mean that with a parks worker or any other worker, that they need all the equipment that they need to do that job, and that should be allocated from the funding source, i.e. public safety fee. So I don't know if that's how we're gonna get there later on or what that looks like. But I do think we need to look at that from a more holistic approach of what it truly costs for that FTE to go do what we've hired them to do. And I don't feel that the public safety fee adequately does that by strictly paying for the wages and personnel. I did not mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Huh?
You got my vote.
I did not mean to cut you off. I was honestly just trying to move this process forward.
Chris, I'm gonna
So
call
there's
on
that.
you and then I'm gonna call the question
Um,
and we'll do a vote.
I just wanted
Get
a
ready,
piece of
Jeff.
clarification. Because the city council approved on that pre-budget for the covered court. And you asked a question about the covered court. Did we get a budget? We have a budget for the covered court. Did we get it directed into the account?
It is not reflected in this budget. we have a, would you call it an engineer's estimate? I mean, it's not, it's more than an engineering estimate, but it's not,
But you
We're-
said you had other ways to get.
we
that.
have other
You have a
ways
budgetary
to
process
fund
to
that. I think, you know, the other piece of this is that we have the project out to bid, and feel free to jump in here, Tiana or
You're good so
Rochelle.
far, yeah.
We've got the project out to bid currently. We opened bids on the 22nd.
Yep.
Is that right?
Correct.
So there's still a whole other funding piece for the whole park that needs to happen before we just fund the covered play area there. So
I was just because of using Don's definition of what a contingency was, and I knew we were getting close to that, I wanted to know if we had it or not.
yeah, depending on how the bid opening goes, this could be a moot point because maybe they come in a little bit less than what we have budgeted and we've got a little bit of free,
Do
little
they
bit of
know what we have
flexibility.
budgeted? 'Cause if they do-
If it doesn't happen that way, then there's a larger discussion that needs to be had, but I think
Thank you.
it's premature to fund it today without knowing the full cost of the park.
And with that said, we are gonna go ahead and do the roll call. Jeff?
Is there a particular order
The
that you'd
motion-
like me to?
No, you can just do it how you
Okay.
did the roll call, but the
Right.
motion on the floor is to put the whole fund, $467,000 into the council contingency fund, and we had a motion and a second on that, so.
Yep.
Let's take a vote.
Okay, so in the same order that we did the roll call, Chris Mayton,
Aye.
Lori Smallwood, I believe is still
On our call.
absent, okay. Rich Sheldon,
Yes.
Christina Ramsayer,
Aye.
Lindy Hanley,
Yes.
Don Hokinson,
Yes.
Kathleen Walker,
Yes.
Jan Lee,
Yes.
Amelia Page,
Yes.
Jeremy Peitzel,
Yes.
Carl Exner,
Yes.
Darren Wegner, yes. Art O'Leary,
Yes.
Linda Malone,
Yes, so it's
carried unanimously, Chair.
unanimous. And at 7:46, we're gonna kind of take a break of 10 minutes and then come back and do urban renewal.
Thank you.
Actually, we'll come back at 8 o'clock and do an hour of urban renewal. Okay, we did forget one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Before we move on to urban renewal, we did the 467 as an amendment, but we're gonna we need to make a motion to approve the overall budget.
I move to approve the 2025 to 2027 City of Sandy budget with the following modification that we put the $467,000 to contingency.
I second that.
Okay, been moved by me and seconded by Lindy. And we will do a vote.
For clarification, that was to the city council's contingency, I believe.
To
it
the
was-
city council.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, that's fine, yep.
Aye.
Yeah, can we do that?
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have a budget. Urban renewal.
Hold on,
Just the
back,
tax
back.
rate. the tax
Oh,
rate.
oh, and the tax rate,
I'd
yeah.
like to move to approve the
Yeah,
city of
you go ahead and do
Sandy's
that.
property tax rate of
And-
$4, 11 and a half
Forgot about
cents
that.
per 1,000 assessed value.
I'll second it.
May I,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be kind of a pain just in
Okay.
case the city,
4.1
the county
152.
assessor, thank you.
Or, sorry, I thought about that.
I just don't want the assessor to say, you didn't approve.
4.1152.
Come
on, IT guy.
I mean, those little,
Not-
those
and then
pennies
count
add up. I
the-
was even looking about that.
Chair, who had the second on that one?
On that one?
Was it Don?
I think it was Don.
Okay.
Three or four.
There was a
Yeah.
few, yeah.
Okay.
Seconded by everybody. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Okay. Urban renewal.
Thank you,
Get new
Chair.
name tags now?
What's that?
Do we get new name tags now?
Yes, you're the urban renewal budget committee.
Layer what? Inside out.
So I'm gonna skip the lengthy budget message that you heard at the beginning of the city council, or the city of Sandy budget meeting and just dive right in. So the Urban Renewal Agency is a separate taxing entity within the city limits of the city of Sandy. There is, for those of you that are not familiar, an urban renewal plan that dictates a list of projects and priorities and the ways in which the urban renewal dollars can be spent. There's some on page 1 of your urban renewal budget. There is a list of the general objectives of the plan, some key highlights, not going to read them all. Improve the vitality of Sandy's downtown core, make productive use of land in the urban renewal area, and make improvements to infrastructure in the renewal area. Within those sort of 7 overarching objectives, there is also a number of specific projects and activities to address blight and deterioration in the downtown area, and those include public improvements. But preservation, rehabilitation, development and redevelopment, property acquisition and disposition, plan designs, and plan administration. The budget before you this evening is balanced as required by state law with total revenues of 7.2 million and total expenditures of 7.2 million. I will note, we talked about this previously with the city budget, but there is a transfer reflected within the urban renewal budget of a little over $1.7 million. That's the debt service for the existing bond that we have within urban renewal. We transfer that to the city of Sandy. City of Sandy is the payer. But that's the big transfer that you see listed in there. A few key projects that are addressed or funded in this budget include the continuation of grant programs at $400,000 for the biennium, $200,000 allocated to what is referenced here in the community campus, but really it's the front half of the old Cedar Ridge site. Council Bill 5.3 was to explore potential interim uses to that site, potentially paving and some stormwater management, so that you could use that for overflow parking or maybe some food carts or some other event space. So that's what that 200,000 is intended to accomplish. And then there's $800,000 allocated to a portion of the reinvestment work at Minnick Park. Minnick Park is obviously very large. If you're standing at the back of City Hall looking down into Minnick Park, you know where No Name Creek is. The infrastructure from No Name Creek this way towards City Hall is within the urban renewal district. So you've got all of those covered structures that are down there that are aged and in need of some repair. Portion of the ADA or of the trails. And then that middle parking lot, not the low parking lot down in the very back of Minnick Park, but the one that's just 10 feet in elevation different than the one that's right outside of City Hall is also within the urban renewal district. So,
But not the fantasy forest.
not Fantasy Forest, no. So this $800,000 and not the gazebo. So this $800,000 is intended to assist in accomplishing the city council's goal of building out those improvements and reinvestment at Minnick Park. We've already seen and approved the parks capital budget that funded $1.7 million in infrastructure improvements. $700,000 of that was grant funding, $1 million of that was SDC funds. This is corresponding allocation to help achieve the reinvestment in that park. And specifically built into this budget because Minnick Park is such a attraction and focal point for all of our community events, whether that's what's that?
Fundraising.
Fundraising. I mean, whether that's, Summer Sounds or Starlight Cinema or Winterfest and Mountain Festival and the Egg Hunt and it's such a hub of all of our community events. It certainly complies with the mission and vision of what the urban renewal district is intended to do. And so that is why that's reflected in this budget.
Is Deer Point, even though the land out there is zone commercial,
Yes, not in urban renewal.
the commercial land, that commercial land is not in the urban renewal zone?
Correct.
Okay.
It's all funded in parks budget.
Yep.
Parks, SDCs.
Just a few final points. There's 0.55 FTE that are billed to urban renewal. That's really just for the plan administration. We got a portion of my time, a portion of Jeff's time, a portion of Kelly's time for grant management, and a portion of Tyler's time for financial oversight. A pretty small percentage of those FTEs. And you'll see the materials and services, it has increased from 553,000 up to 705,000. A portion of that is some just general CPI increases, but $90,000 of that increase is the consultant that we've hired. That 75% of the consultant work that we talked about being billed out of urban renewal is reflected in that materials and services category. Paul said we've still got in this proposed document 3.3, almost $3.4 million in contingency. Here again, urban renewal funds have to be used for urban renewal initiatives, so that contingency can't really be routed anywhere else. And the intent, of course, for that contingency is to have money available in case something comes up in project or new initiative, but also the urban renewal agency exists to achieve council goals and achieve community goals, but sometimes you don't have all those goals fleshed out yet, right? And we've got a lot of opportunities in our downtown core. We've got a lot of opportunities in the general commercial district that overlap with the urban renewal agency, but I think it's important that we keep a healthy contingency until there's a better overall plan and direction for the urban renewal fund. And so that's representative of why there is such a large contingency remaining.
I guess what I would say, just to add, to ask you, if there is anything, I know the council has the right to set whatever comes out of there, but if there is anything that could legally be attributed to this, and used, and I know there are restrictions, but it's got 3.37 million in a contingency. So if there's something that could be logically argued with our legal staff or whatever, that we could use it in there, I would present that to the council for their consideration.
Thank you for that. One thing that I would say is that City Hall is listed as a explicit project within the urban renewal plan. So improvements to this room would certainly comply with the intent of that category or that project. That's not reflected in here currently, as I've already mentioned, largely because I think it really centers around a larger conversation about what to do with this room. In part, the acoustics are as bad as they are in this room because of the way the room is set up. We've done some preliminary work on how to address some of the space needs in this building. And in turn, also some of the issues in this space down here. But that is not a fully formed concept. There still is some work that needs to be done with the urban renewal agency board or the city council, depending on how you want to title them. So that's why it's not reflected in here, because I think there's still some additional work that needs to be done before we
But it
do
could be
that.
done
But
within
it
the next
could-
2-year budget cycle.
Absolutely. This is a great funding source for that one.
And that was one of the things that was a priority among several members
Yep.
of the previous budget committee.
And again, economic development opportunities, right? So we've got the consultant work, but future plans and initiatives could be funded out of this.
Yeah, I know in the past, I know the fire district is part of this, and we have an agreement with the fire district to hold money back or basically be the bank for them while they were going to build their facility there, but they've done that. Do we still need to hold money back for them in the original agreement of the urban renewal district? Because I was assuming that it'd just be built up or a check, or what do we do there?
One could argue that that Sandy Fire District is still eligible for up to $1.4 million in urban renewal funding.
So another reason to make sure if they,
Keep some there.
yeah, if they come calling for it, I mean, that's what they.
But if
are-
they
Is
go
it
away and
guaranteed?
it goes to Clackamas, then.
I don't know how that,
Yeah, 'cause
I would
they're
ask
not-
the lawyers.
They're not part of it anymore. We don't have a say.
Great topic of discussion for a future
Urban
meeting, yes.
Urban renewal board meeting.
And should be something that should be addressed within the next year, because we will be moving that forward, or the plan is to move that forward in November. So
Move what forward?
a possible merge to the voters.
Get rid of the city fire.
I thought they were.
Yeah, annexation into Clackamas Fire.
There, it's preliminary, there's no
Yep.
definites, but they are looking at that, so.
There was a newsletter.
Yep.
Totally off
It's not a
topic,
big
but there was a
secret. It's not a big
newsletter that was
secret.
just
No.
recently put
Yep.
out, community survey
Yep.
about fire service services and likes and dislikes. I sent a link to that to the council of the budget committee that interested. I can certainly forward that to you.
So
as
it
well.
just, it would be good to know if that $1.4 million transfers or what happens.
Yep, we we'll have a conversation about that in the future.
Right, just want to make sure it was.
Yeah.
No, it's
Might
good.
be.
Okay,
It's a
I
great
think I
point.
was next, Chair.
Yes,
I think I
sir.
was next.
Yes, you are.
Can we please get the community center aquatic facility changed to be community campus / Cedar Park? Because we did not spend $6 million. I don't, that's just, that was budgeted. We did this at an actual allocation either, but still, just please change that, because that $200,000 is just for the community campus part. It's not even really Cedar Park.
Yeah, my intention, I have a note right here, is to just rename it something to the effect of like Old Cedar Ridge Middle School site, encompassing of all that property.
Yeah, well.
By the time it gets to the council in June, that's what they'll say.
Yeah, it's easy administrative fix.
Dawn?
I just want to point out, we bought a parking lot too. Under our accomplishments.
Yeah.
Under what?
Under our accomplishments, we bought a parking lot.
We still need to add a fee too.
Oh.
The one across
Put a parking lot.
Ernie's parking lot.
Didn't realize we bought it.
No,
that's
all stuck in my head.
Well,
You know,
Mine
because it
too.
still doesn't have a key up there.
It's got a tiny little sign on it. No,
We
it's
have
still.
lifelines.
See how much I pay attention to the city council.
All right.
Oh, the one.
You're enjoying
the one
retirement.
off of-
It was good, doesn't
Pioneer.
it?
Yeah.
Where was that? Where did that get? Where did that get,
So then we.
It would have
we get
been
the
listed
$5
on
per
page
car during
4
that
under the
bill.
accomplishments.
No, I'm just asking.
Yeah, so
Money goes
it's not presented
Oh, it's
in the, because it's an actual, the purchase price is reflected in, our total spending projections and reflected in the projected beginning fund balance for 25-27. You just can't see it on this chart because we don't show the actuals, but it's all there. So, anything you want to add? Then happy to answer any questions, comments, concerns.
Can you speak a little bit more to the $200,000 for the community center, Cedar Park, old middle school site?
Yeah. Pick a name, any name. So council goal 5.3 for this biennium is to explore interim improvements at the former Cedar Ridge site, including potential paving and necessary stormwater management. So this is a placeholder for some of that work. We need to do some.
Pleasant Street project.
Yeah, there you go. We need to do some additional analysis. We've been working on, Rochelle and her team have been working on sort of a conceptual idea of what could be done there that's not a hugely expensive permanent upgrade, but something that would allow us to utilize that space in a better way, until a more permanent idea is developed.
So not an
Summer for
excavation.
parking and those types of
Exactly,
things.
when we have an event, well, not even an event, when there's a sunny day, the actual parking lot down at Cedar Park is very full. Sandy Net's using the upper portion of, or the portion of the parking lot that's directly
Adjacent to the
along
building.
Pleasant Street. For a lot of their equipment and material storage right now, but that could be moved to another spot on that site and there
Yes,
could be
please.
some pavement and noted.
What did you say? I said, yes, it is.
But we could do some, less expensive but moderate, modest improvements to make it a more usable space for other city events or overflow parking. Food carts for, those warm, busy summer days when people are utilizing the park and they don't have anywhere to eat because there's not a lot of options in that area, so.
Long time ago, I had somebody suggest that it's so far below street grade, that if you just excavate it a little bit more, it could be underground parking with street level parking. You could have double layers and.
I thought you were gonna
There's
say
a bunch
something
of
totally
hidden
different. I was gonna say, don't say it.
The ice rink.
There's a bunch of hidden springs in that site.
But
So
the,
that's not.
Kind of hard to excavate down there.
Yeah, I will say, though, that, this economic development thing, yeah, he's looking at kind of short-term, easy, opportunities for food carts or whatever associated with the Cedar, with the park itself to kind of, build on that for economic development.
Yeah. Working with them. Yeah. Mr. Carl.
Help me to find where the facade stuff is still, or is that not? in
Grant
the
programs.
Couple of years, that one with the grant stuff?
6,900.
So it's just $400,000 in the grant programs.
But no more covered structures, right?
That program has been discontinued. I think there is a
Was the
much
last
needed,
Was the last one Tollgate?
yes, yep. I think there is a much needed conversation with the Urban Renewal Board over grant programs in general. We currently have put the facade improvement and tenant improvement grants within the urban renewal area sort of on hold until we can have that conversation. Previous council had a lot of discussion around more strategic investment, so take a site that is maybe not as beautiful as it could be and think about what we could do with some urban renewal dollars, matching a property owner's investment as well. So I think the concept of facade improvement still very much exists, but more targeted to specific areas in town that are either more visible or get more bang for your buck. Again, part of the work that our economic development consultant will do is help us identify where strategic investments like that make the most sense and where you get the most bang for your buck, i.e. increased property tax valuation or assessed value for property tax collection. That's really the intent of urban renewal, is how do you invest in a building and you know, cure blight, for lack of a better term, but also raise the property tax value enough so that all the taxing districts that are in that area benefit from those improvements.
You go ahead now.
So to that end, if we, urban renewal or board or council takes the initiative to buy a property or acquire a property, we would, from a budget perspective, we would take it out of this contingency line item, so we don't need to do anything extra to think about that ahead of time. We've got up to 3.6 million to invest accordingly, correct?
Perfectly fine, people.
Thanks.
With the caveat that the fire district may, you know, ask for some of those funds. So
It's not,
When the
Written in
chief of the
stone.
Sandy Fire Department comes and asks, we can talk to him.
I'm not saying we need to do it. I'm
There's
just
no chief of the Sandy Fire Department.
I know.
ensuring that comment is made.
so for example, the Studebaker building. If someone came to us and said, I'd like to turn that into the next Lucky Lab brewery pub, because it's rustic and but we need some improvements for a kitchen. Are those the kind of grants that could be given to make it usable for that? Which would be an economic boon to that area.
Assuming we had ERUs available for the increased flows
Correct.
of that
When
site, yes.
all of this stuff is based on post-moratorium.
It may be a more realistic example, because I think we've publicly talked about this a little bit in the past, is, you know, the Bimart shopping center, that whole complex. Potential, you know, there was a conversation with the previous elected body, although some of them are the same, about a more strategic investment there and getting that more Sandy style compliant. So you don't have Spanish style, you know, roof tiles, maybe that's more metal roof, or there's some other facade improvements that could make it more in that Sandy style, you know, visual look instead of just a
From an
concrete building.
economic standpoint, I'd rather concentrate on putting money where it's actually gonna increase businesses as opposed to style. Because once you get the businesses in there, they can all work in concert to lobby for themselves to make it more Sandy style. But until you have it fully occupied, it's kind of spending money before.
So the good thing about our consultants is that he'll be able to, no, not with 100% accuracy, but with a pretty good, you know, range. Say if you were to invest X dollar amount in just facade improvements, here's what it does to the taxable value of the building. Here's what your actual bang for your buck is. If you were to invest in this other type of idea, outfitting a empty business as a restaurant or a brewery,
Right.
here's what, you know, could happen. So we'll be able to have some of those more strategic and direct conversations around, is this the best use or is this the best use?
Well, we look at Gresham, we've got that one shopping center there that's gonna have a Trader Joe's, an In-N-Out burger, it's already got a Day So and Jersey Mike's or whatever, they're filling it up and knocking down and building new stuff. And we're not there yet because we have a moratorium, but at some point in time, not that I want an In-N-Out burger, but at some point in time, we will see that kind of concerted investment in our community too. I hope. Carl.
Yeah, again, going late is always nice because everybody seems to talk about what I was thinking of. I would really pile on to the making businesses more productive and more desirable for downtown Sandy. There's been a bunch of comments in my world anyway about the general look of the landscaping and those kind of things. I'm assuming your contractor will be looking at all those places of how to make downtown more incentivized to be able to build and establish empty buildings and empty lots as well.
It's a pretty nice looking little downtown.
They could use some improvement. There's some things that have gotten rugged. So I'm looking forward to that plan and I'd like to be able to put some of that stuff. So I suspect though that all we can do here is to say things like what the chair has suggested, that we spend energy on the businesses and making them more beneficial to coming into the city and to be able to make the downtown more of a of a place that will bring in those businesses. And I think that's probably the limit until you get your contractor to say, that's what they seem to think is the right thing to do downtown. And that's months off, is that right?
Well, we have a meeting Monday.
A week from today.
With the city council and John Lagarza, our consultant, to talk about initial priorities. I assume that, one of those priorities is filling vacant storefronts or working towards filling vacant storefronts. I see some heads nodding, so I'm gonna take that as a yes. But certainly, part of that whole conversation with him is, okay, what else can we do? And how do you keep people interested and keep businesses, proactively engaged with us so that as ERUs come available, we kind of have maybe a running list of people that are ready to move
Reach
into a
out to.
building or ready to buy property and build something.
Would that include an FTE or a partial FTE as a way to draw this thing all along, or are we not there at this point in this conversation? Because it seems to me
That's what the
that
consultant.
you don't have anybody there, this headless giant.
Yeah, I guess I would disagree. We have 2 years of funding for this consultant. And they've done work with a bunch of different towns in the county at doing economic development and getting businesses filled in and really successful. So I'm excited to, obviously we can't do as much, with a moratorium as we might want to, but that's kind of what he's doing, is really kind of figuring out where the low hanging fruit is, what can we do, fill those existing vacant businesses, focus on, I'm sorry, what? Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I just, the idea that we can, go ahead and get, get some projects that can go forward with, given the moratorium, but also if we do get the 190 extra ERUs, what's the high priority projects for that? So I'm really excited about it, and I think,
Yeah, I just also want to stress too, that just because we have a consultant doesn't mean that there's not some staff work that's being allocated to this. If a business owner calls City Hall, which frequently happens, they may talk to Kelly about, the permit process or development opportunities. They might talk to Jeff about something else. Jeff and I have met with, business owners in the past to talk about their, aspirations about coming to Sandy when the opportunity presents itself. So just because we have a consultant doesn't mean that we're removing ourselves from the conversations. It just is a different sort of format for keeping other people engaged. This person specifically who has a huge network of contacts, both with other cities and at the county level, just sets us up for better success to take care of some of that administrative work and the outreach that
And achieve those
we just don't
goals.
have.
So my question was, are we,
Yeah.
can I finish?
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
don't mean to be implied, just.
Well, I didn't,
Finish my
did you
question.
have your thing up, but you put it down?
He's finishing his question.
He's finishing his
Because-
question, okay, yeah.
The question was, we're probably not gonna be able to establish a whole lot of priorities here today, other than some of the general ones. Because you have that contractor coming in the next, whatever, calls 9 months or so to develop priorities, is that right? So our job here is general in nature, rather than specific line items.
he's under a 2-year
We're just doing the
contract.
Shura budget.
Or whatever time
It's
he's
not
got,
line items.
he can't really make any major decisions here, line items specifically. Because you already got a process, it's gonna take us a while.
You're right.
Right.
You're right.
I mean, unless there's something near and dear to your heart that you think needs to be funded immediately, you can, float that idea. But, at this point, I think it's working through the consultant process, making sure that we have consensus with the Urban Renewal Agency Board, Economic Development Advisory Committee, Advisory Board. So.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
Is that all right if I make a motion?
No,
well, I think I was gonna
I didn't see
say,
any cards up. so
well,
that's-
I didn't see a card up, but Chris, did you have something you want to say?
no, we have to do public comment before we can take a motion.
I was assuming since there was no public comment at the last meeting, there probably isn't here. Is there any
Probably
public
true.
comment online or in the audience who'd like to speak to the Shura budget? Seeing none, we will go ahead and.
We have one individual
We do.
on Zoom, so I
Oh,
might just
okay,
give that
good.
person just a second to see if they
Sure.
raise their hand.
Sure.
So I don't see a name, but if you'd like
I
to
just
click that raise hand button, if
Made
you'd like
that
to speak.
assumption. We can see.
Chair, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Go, Jeremy.
All right, I'll make I move to approve the 2025, 2027 Sandy Urban Renewal Agency budget as presented.
A second. Oh, you take it.
Oh.
I guess a second all.
Moved by
I
Jeremy.
get to say second all the
Moved by
time.
Jeremy, seconded by Amelia. Can we do this on a vote point or do you want to voice vote?
That's up to you, sure.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the sure budget passed.
I told you 27 and it was 29. Dang it.
You
So
did not
close.
jinx it. You were good.
That whole public comment.
So close. Yeah, that was Don's fault.
I won't point fingers, I'm just saying, I was real close.
And I didn't know you were timing.
All of them.
Will this come to the council at the first meeting in June?
Yes.
Yes.
So every member of the budget committee, if you want to show up for the first council meeting in June and see them, do the formal adoption.
And we should also note,
Bring in cookies.
Chair, we should also note, I mean, that'll include a public hearing as well. So for anyone watching this
Anybody out
recording
there
later,
watching wants to,
please feel free to come to the
Are
hearing.
we adjourned?
I move that we adjourn at 8:30.
Hey, you're not gonna, for your last time?
Everybody,
There it is.
thank you very much for your participation.